Hello and welcome to Infrastructure Matters by IPWA, the podcast dedicated to exploring the dynamic world of infrastructure, asset management and public works. I'm your host, David Jenkins, Chief Executive of IPWA. In today's episode, we're delving into the complexities and innovations in local government leadership and asset management. Scott will share his unique journey from fleet management to leading a major local government organisation. We'll discuss strategic thinking, community engagement and the importance of collaboration in local government. So grab a coffee, sit back, and let's explore the transformative change strategy shaping our local government landscape.
All right, well, I'm delighted that we've got our next in our podcast series. We're at the Brisbane Showgrounds at the Fleet Conference that we hold every year, and this year has been exceptional, just with the number of delegates and also the number of sponsors and exhibitors. So it's been really good. But I'm absolutely thrilled that we've got Scott Owen, who's going to be speaking for us today and having a conversation. And Scott joined the panel and also did a fantastic presentation to kick off the conference. And Scott's the CEO of Mackay Regional Council, but he started his career in the fleet side of things and is now the chief executive. So, Scott, I just wanted to, and thank you for coming along today. I just wanted to open the sort of conversation. We've been talking broadly around, in all the different conversations we've had around asset management and the importance of understanding asset management right across local government from all facets. So from your viewpoint, you've come from the fleet side of things, managing fleet mobile assets, and now you're the chief executive. How have you sort of got the organisation at Mackay to start thinking more broadly around, so everyone's on the same page when it comes to thinking about asset management and the philosophy of asset management and why it's so important?
Thanks, David. I think for me, when I think about elected members as the example, there is no requirement to be a councillor of any specific knowledge, outside of what they just do. They represent the community. And it's a very important point to understand that they're not asset management experts, and we do need to teach them along the way. So certainly from my perspective, one of the main things that we've done well at council over the last year or so is actually getting them together and having education sessions around what our asset classes are, what's the value of that. Mackay's got $4.3 billion worth of assets, and that's a huge responsibility for an organisation. And with that becomes challenges such as depreciation that not necessarily is understood. So I think it's getting the right experts in the room, and we have frequent presentations from our asset management team that come to council and explain where we're actually at to try and get a base level understanding to the council.
And how do you, because, as you say, people, elected members, they're doing that because typically they're passionate about their local community. They want to make a difference. They feel that they come from a variety of different backgrounds. But how, and let's focus on this elected member training, which we've released some training recently, which has been very popular. But how do you do that in sort of a non-confronting way? Because not many people want to stick up their hand and go, well, I don't really understand that. So how do you sort of get the conversation going that's not in a non-confronting sort of way?
Yeah, look, I think when we think about how we brief council, generally we hold a briefing session every week around different topics, and we just make sure, regardless of the level you might know, that we do cover the basics. But I guess it's also important not to get into the minutiae or operational elements of asset management, because as a councillor they don't need to be in that operational detail, and in fact should be thinking more strategically. And I often say, instead of talking about a pothole on the street, let's talk about the road resurfacing program for the next 5 years and what that looks like. So really, from my point, it's really starting to push the conversation in the direction we ultimately want it to go, and it takes time and it takes persistence, but over that time you start to watch the questions start to change.
Yeah, okay. And in terms of, and we're going back to this whole thinking around a philosophy of asset management right across the organisation, and you used the term, you said, depreciate, it's not really well understood, depreciation, and different areas of council might understand depreciation differently. How do you get the organisation working so it's talking about a shared vocabulary around things? So when we talk about asset management and we talk about depreciation of assets, we talk about whole of life costing, and we talk finance might have one view, for example, the asset management team might have another view. How do you sort of change it so that the organisation is working towards the same outcome with a sort of shared vocabulary around these things?
Yeah, look, I think that's the journey we've been on at Mackay for the last year or so. And, one of the first steps we did probably about 12 months ago was getting all our asset owners in the room together and talking about some of our problems. You know, when we talk of how many assets are now overdue for renewal or replacement, the number is, you know, it's significant, and we need to make sure we've got the focus, and it's not just the loudest voice wins. But then again, it ties back into this elected member piece around where our budget goes each year. So we need to tie that into finance so that when we present, we're not informing council that there's a budget of X million to do whatever they may wish. It's actually, this portion is taken away because these replacements of critical infrastructure, be it roads, water, whatever it might be, needs to happen. And we need to get out of the mindset of shifting that to a later period, because all we're doing is just delaying the cost burden to the ratepayer.
And how so has that changed the sort of mode of conversation? Because it's, so my understanding, you sort of say, right, okay, well, we've got this amount of money for a maintenance and renewal, we've got this to do, you know, this is the amount of money that we basically got in the budget to do net new if that's what we feel we need to do. So has that changed the sort of conversation?
Yeah, look, I've watched the dynamic change over the last few months, and people are now starting to ask, if we do this, what are we not doing instead? And that's the point we want to get to, where people understand that the asset has value. And, you know, it's also important that we talk about grants. You know, grants always seem fantastic, that we can get, you know, $10 million from the state government to do a particular thing, and we might only need to put $5 million in it. But council's then got the depreciation burden for years to come and the operational expenses. So we just need to make sure we're talking about that. You know, not every dollar is equal. So it's all well and good to go out there and get it, but then we need to understand, how does that fit in with our long-term financial forecast over the next 10 years?
Yep.
And how do we plan for that?
And how do you engage the local community, and how do you engage them in the conversation? Because there's a conversation there with your board, the elected members. There's a conversation with your team internally. But how do you work with the local community? Because, you know, they might have a view that again, the same things. They probably don't understand the complexities. They don't understand the maintenance and renewal. Maybe they do, but maybe they don't. So how do you engage with them and work with them so that they're sort of part of the decision-making process?
Yeah, look, I think strategic community education and communication is something that needs to be developed across local government. And I think it's only just recently, actually talking to our comms team, we're talking about how do we start to ensure that the resident understands what these assets do, and, you know, even right the way through to service delivery. You know, as a resident, do I understand that actually only a percentage, very small percentage of my rates bill may go towards this, or it might go towards this? What does that mean? So currently, we're probably at the position where any of our larger projects that are going to impact the community, we hold regular sessions throughout that, where myself and the elected members turn up, and we'll have a sort of Q&A. But that's very much focused on, you know, the benefits the project will bring, etc. But we're there to also allay any concerns if the resident has them. I do still think there's a separate piece of work required around educating our community on where our dollars go, what they do, and how we sort of future-proof that. A lot of people see debt, as an example, as something really bad, you know, that council's getting into debt, but it's there to cover intergenerational ratepayers. You know, we can't go and just build a $30 million facility today out of the ratepayer monies. You know, that would be irresponsible. So we look to say, well, let's stage that over the life so that everyone's paying their sort of fair share. And again, you know, that's probably not understood across all of local government areas.
Yeah, and I mean, fair to say, and these are my words. Yeah, well, but you are a mover and a shaker, and you like to make change, and you're prepared to do that and innovate. And that's interesting. You talk about how the strategic comms and the strategic comms piece. So, because, you know, getting the ratepayer to understand exactly what local government does, that's one thing. But also, it would be fair to say that local, and I'm talking broadly here, local government is also, it's expected to do more. Like there's suddenly, oh no, can you run the childcare facility? Oh, can you do, and it's more and more and more and more with less. How do you see all that playing out? And I'm talking broadly. I'm not just talking about your capital.
I think you know, the reliance and need for data really drives that. You know, people say, why can't we? And I think if we go back to the sort of strategic comms piece, the more people slowly start to understand at what cost things come.
Yeah.
You know, they may then start associating that with their own rates bill. You know, it's very easy to live in any local government area and complain that my rates are too high, and that probably means we don't understand where they're spent.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've just gone through an exercise recently at Mackay where we've sort of really broke down service delivery to your rates bill, so that, as an example, you know that $72 of your rates bill goes towards grass cutting. So when we talk about increase in service frequency for that particular asset class, we know that that's going to change, and therefore you'd pay more. So I think having the conversations and starting off with the education piece is really the fundamental step. I mean, and the reality is also, I think, and this has been prevalent in the local government elections, a good sort of 60-70% of people in the local government area don't know who council is or what they do. They just don't. And to think that you'd convert 100% of people to be walking around citing your budget book, is impractical and impossible. But it's the few that do care. If we can put out the information, and we can, local governments are transparent organisations. You can pretty much request any information you want from anywhere. But it's how do we put it into bite-sized chunks that people understand, so that when you get those community meetings and someone wants an aquatic facility at $100 million, or whatever it might be, you're able to explain how that looks in future years as well.
Yeah. Just changing the conversation a bit. I mean, talking about sort of capacity and capability within local government. So, we've always, and this is also shared with Engineers Australia, just the concern there has, particularly around local government engineers and getting people interested and excited and in a career in local government engineering, and also asset management. And as we talk outside of their fleet, people coming through in the succession planning with people managing fleets. What's your view, and what do you think local government could or should be doing to build capacity and capability? Because if we all want all these great services, and we've talked about asset management and the philosophy, but you also need people to deliver it, and you need good people.
It's probably one of our biggest challenges, and I probably recall back to a time this year when we had 0 engineers. Literally the whole team was empty. There's no one there. We're competing in a mining environment where people can go and earn twice the money. Local government traditionally was known for its flexible work environment or its RDO. And I think over time, that's become less and less attractive, and less people want to come and work at local government. So for me, one thing regionally, one thing we didn't have was a graduate program at all. We wasn't actively looking to attract that early talent. We implemented our first graduate program about 6 months ago, and we've now got about, I think maybe 6 or 7 engineers working with council.
Yep.
But I'm just taking that to the next level at the moment, from what I believe is a first in the country, I think, and that is I'm currently working with the CEO of Mackay Sugar and the CEO of an energy company to actually talk about an inter-company rotating graduate program, instead of just having just your 2 years and you're just at council, because that's not as attractive. We've got to start thinking outside the box about why come to Mackay. We've got a sugar industry that provides a third of Australia's sugar, and at particular peak periods of time during shutdowns, they have no staff, and we need to start assisting each other, not competing with each other. So, the aim of this potential new graduate program is that at that particular period of time, the graduates that we've obtained, be they mechanics, electrical engineers, whatever they might be, they can shift over and assist our community when they need it most, but also start understanding the different work sets. And that then is when it comes not about a competition of salary or the job itself, but to me that becomes a competition of culture. So how do you demonstrate in that 2-year period that, hey, I had my best time at council because, and that's what I like to try and work on.
Yeah, what a great initiative. So, and how did you sort of come to that? How did you get that organised? And what was the sort of, when you collaborate across your sectors there, how are you, you've got a couple of shared interests, and the shared interest presumably was we need to get new talent and we all need to do that and we all need to, is that how you sort of?
Pretty much just resources. When I sit down and I look at our personal resource issue, we're averaging about a 17% vacancy rate. We've got 160 odd vacancies across the board in lots of key positions. Asset management is certainly one of them. It's almost a dying trade almost. And those engineers, and to be quite honest, I just picked up the phone and I spoke to the CEO of Sugar and said, what are you doing about this? And collectively we're just doing the same thing but competing with others. I had one of my staff left and went to Sugar, and then one left and went to the mines. And so from there, I just picked up the phone and had the conversation with sort of my counterparts in that area and said, hey, what about if we do this?
Yeah.
And I guess everyone sort of looked at that and gone, hey, that could really work. And at the very least, let's give it a go. And if it doesn't work, then let's move on and understand what's next. But I think it's we need to do something. We can't expect change if we don't make it. And one thing's for certain, if we just rely on what we're always doing, it's not working.
Yeah.
You know, regional Australia is difficult. It is no different to the city environment. You know, we've got to cater for jobs that at the moment you can pretty much fully remotely work from home, which is appealing to some, not to others.
Yeah.
It's a constant evolving landscape that I think you just need to remain pragmatic and agile about, well, what can we do? And don't be afraid to think outside the box.
Yeah. And culture, let's just dig a little bit deeper into that. So culture-wise, how have you sort of looked to change or shape the culture at Mackay? And what are some of the things that you're doing around that?
I think the biggest thing for me is putting authority where the information is. You know, the amount of delegations that I held as the CEO to sign off on some fairly BAU activities, you know, was pretty alarming to me. And it was like, well, hey, I've got all these experts in these roles and they're not even empowered to make a decision. So how do we change that? And, you know, I've changed a large number of those delegations now where the relevant executive manager or director has the ability to make a decision because they know there's accountability. And I think certainly for the long tenured staff or the people that have been there a while, start to look at this and go, oh, wait, actually, maybe we can suggest some change because it appears that we're doing things a little bit differently. So I think for me, it's always been, you know, I have regular catch-ups with several layers of leadership groups just on their own and talk about the same vision, which is empowerment, delegating that sort of overall authority so that people understand, okay, I don't have to ask. I don't need CEO approval to go and buy something that's just part of my everyday job. You know, that's just pretty crazy. There's no legislative requirements for some of these things. And I think you've just got to balance that up versus the risk versus, you know, some other factors to consider in local government, like the political sides.
Yeah.
And then if you can do it, you should.
Yeah. And I think you sort of part answered this question, but when on stage you talked about leadership across all levels, doesn't matter what you're doing, you can still exhibit leadership skills. And now you just talked about empowering people. If most of our members are the local government engineering space, asset managers, public works professionals, what is it from your viewpoint as a CEO? What advice would you give to them? What are you looking for from that group? Right? As a CEO, what is it that you want from them, and how can they make sure that they're getting you the best? And then on the flip side, you know, what are you doing to help them? And you've talked about empowerment, right? So I guess I'm just interested in that whole sort of relationship.
I think you know, when I look at leadership across all the levels is interesting because there's of course different connotations to what leadership is. I mean, you can't just have everybody delegating and empowering somebody else because you'll never actually get anything done. So it's important to have that line and understand. But I even reflect back to my very early start of my career, I guess, which was in the military, which, you know, when you start, you don't have a rank and anything like that, but you're still a leader. You know, you don't have to be someone to lead. And that's all about, from a personal perspective, improvise, adapt and overcome. You know, it's very easy when you're, you know, be it working on a shop floor or working in an office to say, I've got a problem, I better go and speak to my coordinator about this. Well, you know, what I look for is someone that can say, hey, I've got a problem and I'm going to try and think of a solution that I can suggest and make that change. And then, of course, having that sort of open collaboration with whatever layers of leadership to say, hey, you know, this is one thing I've thought about. I think that's how you really start that empowerment. And for me, and certainly my team in Mackay, understand that, hey, they can reach out and say whatever it might be, whatever initiative or innovation, without the fear of, you know, it just being shot down or just dismissed.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And just going on your sort of personal journey, and it's an interesting one. And you've already said you're in the British Army, and then you moved over here, and then you worked your way in a private company, and then you worked your way up very quickly to become the CEO of Mackay. What have you? And I'm specifically interested in starting the job at Mackay. What are some of the challenges that you found? The really tough challenges as being the CEO of Mackay, but also some of the opportunities, and I guess sort of interlinked in that, what keeps you awake at night?
Yeah, look, I think one of the challenges for me, and I guess for most leaders, which is that sort of imposter syndrome, right? And it's, you know, you start a new role, especially a significant role in a significant organisation, and I kind of sit there and go, oh, geez, you know, what am I doing? and that's not uncommon. And I think it's healthy to talk about and to sort of say, well, hang on, why am I here? Okay, well, I'm a great leader and I can do this and I can do this. The challenge is, of course, is to not inundate yourself with absolutely everything, because you'll get lost. A local government is a very complex environment. You can be dealing with overgrown grass one day and barking dogs through to regulatory matters or whatever it might be, or complexities in a planning scheme, for example. And I think that's then around surrounding yourself from a sort of diversity of thought perspective in leadership to make sure that you've got a great team of people that, again, are empowered to make decisions and to guide you, and so that we can work together. I always challenge status quo. If I hear about, oh, well, that's just how we do it, I like to challenge that and say, well, is it still the best way, and what can we do about it? So, there's some of the challenges, and I think what keeps me up at night, lots of things actually, but I think if I had to pull it out, for me, I've got such a sense of responsibility to make our community a fantastic place to live, not just now, but for the next ever.
Yep.
And it's such a prestigious position to be in, and one that I deeply sort of am honoured to be in this role, and I guess that is what keeps me awake, making sure that I know I'm consistently demonstrating value for money for the ratepayer.
Yeah. And how do you take, because you're making changes and you've already just talked about them, and you're prepared to do that, and you're prepared to make decisions, and you're prepared to challenge the status quo. How do you take your elected members on the journey? Because that's obviously a part of it, and we've just discussed the elected members come from a variety of different backgrounds. They're not always completely FA with local government. They've got so how do you take them on the journey as well?
Yeah, I think one thing's for certain, and that is, if you're not a disruptor, you will be disrupted. And for me, how I personally do it is establish relationships, and that's hard to do in a group environment. If we come and sit down as a whole council, it's very difficult. I spent a lot of time in my first sort of 3 to 4 months really getting to know the councillors and understanding their vision, why they're here and what they want to do. And then it's almost about not changing the vision of where you want everybody to be, but it's just articulated it in a different way so that people understand what it means to them, acknowledging that, again, there's no formal requisites to be a councillor. You just need to have been voted in. So to understand someone's vision, I can gently push in the right direction of, yes, but have you considered, or what do you think? And sort of give them the resources so that they reach the conclusion. Because what we're trying to do isn't made up. A lot of it makes commercial sense, and when they understand that and get those light bulbs clicking, that's something that you go, oh, finally, we're on the same page. Okay, now let's move forward.
Yeah. And how have you found the sort of differences? You worked at Brisbane Council, very, very, I would imagine, very, very different resources, abundance. You are working in a regional council. What are some of the other than what I've just said? What are some of the key differences that you've found? And we've talked about capacity and capability and employment, and you've come up with some solutions there. But what other sort of differences and nuances have you found working in those two environments?
I think the biggest. I wasn't in the obviously wasn't in the same role in there, so I only assume from a scope perspective that it's the same problems, but they're much more complex because we don't have the amount of resources. We don't have the financial ability to solve some of them. We've got to really think outside the box for different ways to do that. And that's where I think, intertwining with other local governments, I talk to our counterparts a lot around, what they're doing. There's nothing worse in local government. I was just having this conversation a few moments ago, actually, that there's nothing worse when you come here and say, oh, I tried to solve this problem, but it failed because I did this. And someone goes, me too. What a collective waste of money and time.
Yeah.
So how do we facilitate a platform where we understand, hey, that's actually not worthwhile. It's not going to work. Let's do it this way. And that's where there's some great organisations about that facilitate. And, IPWI is one of those that you can have those interactions to say, yeah, well, have you considered this particular way, and just generate those ideas.
Yeah, okay. So, and this sort of leads me on to my last question. So, in terms of local government broadly, how it can work better together, and you've talked about collaboration and working, let's not do the same problem. That's a waste of resource. Let's share some of the solutions. How else do you see local government changing or needing to change over the next sort of 10, 15, 20 years? How do you see that all playing out?
Yeah, look, I think especially in this data-driven technology world that we're heading in, you know, a lot of local governments got a lot of catching up to do. So how do we start leveraging technology to inform decisions with an expected and increased demand from the ratepayer about the services they receive or how they receive them or when? So I think we'll start to see a shift in, you know, expectation on service delivery or, you know, even the service standard, what is or isn't acceptable anymore. So I think there's a lot of work to do together in local government. And I guess from my point of view, it's very easy to sort of sit there and say, well, it's not going to work, or, you know, that's just never going to happen. Whereas I probably take a bit more of a proactive approach, and I will ring up a neighbouring CEO and say, hey, let's get together and go talk about this. And, you know, they're absolutely open to do that. And then you find out, oh, we got all the same problems. What do you know? And even from that regional perspective, you know, I mean, I think to Mackay, for example, we got Mackay, Isaac with Sunday Council in the regions. You know, how do we come up with combined strategies to reduce, you know, future spend? And one of those examples could be, you know, how we do waste or FOGO, circular economy, all those sorts of things. What we don't want to be known, you don't want to be crossing a border of, you know, a very short distance and then someone does something completely different. So there's lots of collaboration to do. And even just into service delivery, you know, you go, there's actually a particular stretch of a road, and it was just the most bizarre thing, the most simplest thing that made the biggest difference. And it was because, you know, one council mowed a strip on a Monday and the others did it on a following Tuesday. Yep. And it always just looked horrendous. Yep. And you know, it was like, has anyone actually spoken to that council and said, hey, can you do it on a Monday instead? And now they do. Yeah. And it's a flawless approach. It's not this is better than this. So I think it's just, you know, really having those conversations and not being afraid to pick up the phone and talk to your counterparts, because everyone's willing to help.
Yeah. That's good, and I think that's probably a good note to end on. Scott, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you. And you know, when you're up there on stage and you said, well, look, if people can go away with something and they've thought about something a bit differently, then I think I've done a good job. And I think you've certainly stimulated that with me today in the conversation, and I think with the whole audience there when you're out there today. So sincere thanks. Thank you for joining us, and all the very best.
Cheers, David. Thanks.
And that brings us to the end of another insightful episode of Infrastructure Matters by IPWA. A big thank you to our esteemed guest, Scott Owen, for sharing his invaluable insights and experiences in local government leadership and asset management. Today's conversation highlighted not only the challenges we face, but also the innovative solutions and best practices being implemented. To our listeners, thank you for joining us. We hope today's discussion has broadened your understanding of the critical role of local government in our communities. Stay tuned for more episodes where we delve into the world of infrastructure and public works. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more engaging conversations. I'm David Jenkins, signing off and reminding you that in the realm of infrastructure, every detail matters.